Kyira. Kyira dragged her belt blade through the slaver's throat, acutely aware of each tendon and muscle tugging on the fine serrated edge. Warm blood burst out over her hand. She had taken the vein. A momentary flutter, but she clenched the bone handle and completed the movement, as though she was simply preparing a pig for the Feast of Moons. Even as a slaver fell, another emerged from the mist, taller than the last by 2 heads and twice as wide. His minksin swirled behind him, a wide canvas larger than a sleeping mat. She set her feet as he barreled towards her, spinning a 2-handed oar-tax above his head with one arm. Kyira dove and slid into the plug of ice she had hauled out barely an hour before and sprang back to her feet.
"All he wanted to know was if you had any friends out there, girl," rasped the huge slaver. "The kin would save you all. Might even let you go if you had a map or 2. His deep-set eyes took her in. "I guess not. Still, that ain't no problem of mine. My reckonings tell me that you're out here all by yourself. There ain't no one what can save you."
"Get back," snarled Kyira, swiping a nervous fish blade out in front.
"I don't think so, girl. Not me. You might be quick enough to catch old Okvik off guard, but not me, little one. Not Siskin."
Kyira shifted left, feigning an escape.
"Oh, no, you don't."
The slaver rushed forward, realizing too late that the ice hole lay between them. His feet slipped as he tried to fight his own momentum, but he slid awkwardly in, coming to a stop with one arm and leg stretching out of the hole.
"Curse you!"
Guttural pants punctuated each word.
"Forbringrs, curse you!"
His muscles shook as he struggled, searching for purchase on the sharp edges. Kyira held her belt blade low but steady. The slaver's oar-tack sat just out of his reach, but it was heavy enough to rebalance him. He clearly had the same thought.
Arrgh!
He thrust out his arm and clasped at the weapon's handle, but the move shifted his weight the wrong way, and he slid into the hole like a fat seal. She turned away. No splash.
Splash!
She spun on her spot and peered into the ice hole. The slaver was holding his head barely a finger's breadth from the slushy surface. The metal point of his oar-tax rammed into the wall, giving him enough tension to hold himself rigid against the inside. He was strong, but those great muscles were shaking, and he was holding his breath. It was silent again, but not the silence when useful things are being done. This was the special quiet that came before death, before the old ox was slaughtered, before the dog that had bitten its master was put down, before the pig. Kyira sidestepped around the hole, away from the slaver's head, and tapped the crook of his knee with her moccasin. The tension broke, his grip failed, and the slushy Laeb swallowed him with barely a sound. She stared at the gently bobbing eyes, as though his wide mottled face might somehow emerge, angry and dripping, ready to exact hateful vengeance. But she knew better. His pig heart had beat its last. She forced her gaze up, scanning the Laeb. Mist was not unusual for this time of year, nor this time of day, but it had come on so quickly she had barely finished setting her fishing line when the hills had vanished behind a thick veil. At least she knew exactly where she was, as Pathwatchers always did. The first slaver was sprawled a few paces away, surrounded by dark spatters. She collected her oil tin, but didn't relight it. Slavers always traveled in twos, but there might be more out there yet. She rewound the wick and pressed it into the congealed mixture, then tucked it away in her waist bag. She squatted over the slaver's corpse, holding her belt blade over his ruined neck. There was no coming back for this pig, but it never hurt to stay cautious. His face was black with lines, but there was no elegance to them, and they had no story to tell. Nothing she could make out anyway. She touched her chin, feeling the raced patterns and following them to her cheeks. Each of the 5 lines marked her cycles since becoming an adult. The beginning of her story, her aspirations, and her life. A Pathwatcher's life. She blinked at the slaver. His lines were those of a fishman, a chaser of sharks, and yet here he was, inland, chasing down simple folk. The Sami had a name for those who ignored the lines written into their skin, Kiuldi, and this man's aspirations looked as though they had been forgotten many moons ago. Where his skin wasn't lined, it was cracked and red. A southerner, not used to the cold, dry winds of Nord, and judging by the beige patches on his breeches, he'd spent weeks, maybe months, in the saddle. She rummaged through his pockets, ignoring the fleas crawling freely between his inner and outer garments. A dirty pipe made from a wood she had never seen before, some flint, some rolled smoke leaf, a chew stick, and a small pouch. She pulled the drawstrings and let the weight inside tip out onto her palm. There was no mistaking it. Even in Nord, babies sucked from the varnished wooden bulb to help them sleep. So he was a man, a father. What sort of woman would have bred with you? Certainly no Sami, nor any other Nordun woman that Kyira had met. A colony of dark specks crowded around a spot of blood on his furry hood. And she stood, feeling nauseous. Regardless of who he was, nobody who let themselves get in such a state lasted long out here. Not least those who kept their guard down for so long. They had to have had a camp close by, she thought, as she dragged him to the ice hole. The body slid along the edge, tipping in head first, just like his friend. The ice plug came next, and it dropped neatly back into the hole, forcing a little water to gurgle up the sides. Pocketing the slaver's pouch, she dipped her hands in the water and scrubbed the blood from his skin, trying to picture which sort of fire would warm her up the quickest. It was a half-day's walk from here on the lake, back to where Aki, her father, had camped, and she would need to find somewhere along the way to sleep. There were a number of places. The cave up on the fourth sister above the waning crescent, a hidden alcove in the small waterfall, a league beyond on the last sister. She might get wet, but at least she would be hidden. The cave would be best, and the fourth sister was a tall enough hill to spot anyone following. The dark residue, colorless in the evening light, pooled with the quickly freezing water, creating patterns. She had not planned on being away from home for so long, but the new season's taimen living in the lake were far too fat to just leave to the Orca, and twilight was the best time to catch them. It was why she had spent most of the day cutting such a big hole through the ice. It was lucky it was not yet spring. Things might have gone very differently if she had been fishing for eels. A noise blew in from the north bank, and her breath caught. A wicker. She stared into the darkening night, but the mist gave nothing away. The belt blade slipped back into a sheath at her waist with a reassuring rasp, its bone handle still sticky with the slaver's blood. The rack of 4 taimens went over her back, the clasp hooking through the loop on her shoulder. And lastly, a fishing line, which she spun quickly around the gnarlnut shell, was thrust into her waist bag. It was time to go. She spared the mist a final glance and sped off over the ice towards the far bank. The frozen estuary was narrow, but she was closer to the northern side than the south. Hard ice crunched underfoot, so loud she was sure someone would hear. But she pushed on, reaching the south bank's shoreline well within an hour. She slowed as she approached the rocky outcrops. If there were more slavers, they couldn't have guessed she could cross the lake so quickly. In any case, they were mounted, and she was not. Weaving deftly between the rocks, she leaped over the thinnest ice and onto the shore. The ground was permafrost all year round here along the Jagar, the line that marked the upper circle of the world, and was perfect for running. Only her brother Hassan could match her stride, but not for long.